For the next 7 weeks, we said we're going to be talking about the 7 I am statements in the book of John. And last week, we learned that Jesus is the bread of life, and we learned what that really meant. It meant a whole lot more than just basic food. It was the essentials. And each of these I ams, each of these statements he makes are reminders first and foremost that the phrase I am is telling us I am God. I am who I am. What is your biggest darkness fear? Were any of you afraid of the dark as kids? Anybody afraid of the dark as kids? A little bit, yeah. I mean, yeah. We had some in our house. It sort of wasn't allowed. You know, you could be afraid of the dark, but it wasn't going to be a lot of good. I mean, but that's sort of, you know, it's something you have to outgrow at times. But yet, I know there's a lot of folks who still, you know, want to keep a light on in the house. We actually keep the light on in the bathroom outside of our bedroom just because at this point in life we don't want to get up and fall on our face if we have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I know in Mom's physical treatment or her therapy kit, one of the things they brought in it besides all these things to go with a little bag on the walker and the gripper to pick stuff up and all was a nightlight, because they told her that you need to be able to see what's going on in the house. You shouldn't be getting up in the dark. But sometimes that darkness isn't as much about the safety as it is about sheer fear. You know, I mean, when have any of you ever been in total darkness? You've been in a position where it's just absolutely a cave.
The store lights go when you're blacked out in the store. If
inside a block building.
You can't see anything.
No openings. Where?
The middle of the Mediterranean with no stars and no moon.
Oh.
And just black.
Total black.
Wow. And it's kind of weird, isn't it? There's blacks where you truly cannot see your hand in front of your face. I mean, you could kind of feel it there, but no matter how hard. And that's been me. And when I've been in a cave, when we did the youth camp and we went spelunking and we got in a part of the cave and went in there and they take you in, and if you've ever been to Luray, they often do that. You go down to Luray and they take you down to one point and they tell you to turn out all the lights. I mean, even the fish in that pond in Luray have no color. They're white and they're blind. Because without light, there is nothing but darkness. Now, obviously, on a day like today, it wouldn't matter if I told Marvin to turn the lights out. We probably wouldn't know it. But even if I turned these lights out, which was focused up here, as I turn those out, doesn't it feel a little darker out there too? And they're completely focused against this wall. And I know the scientists are saying, well, we're getting reflection, but really what's happening is that diffusing of light. It goes everywhere. And light can't be contained. It only goes as far as it's strong enough to go. But I don't know about you, but in those areas where you've been in total darkness, could you feel your heart rate step up a little bit? Maybe the palms start to sweat a little bit, and nothing changed. You knew you were in the same place. You were still on board the ship. You were still in the same store. You were still where you were, but that total darkness. I mean, I can remember in that youth group camping thing that I did. They, of all people, they told me that we had a group. They had to go back and get some of the kids who kind of lagged back, and they wanted me to lead the group out. And we're crawling through a tunnel. I mean, crawling through tunnels, I mean, you know, I said this because that's what I felt like. And obviously I wouldn't fit in that, but that's what it felt like. And it went up and it would turn, and the only thing I had was my headlamp. But yet, you know, when you first turn, if that headlamp is focused and I'm turning here, it's hitting the wall, there's nothing. Now I have no idea what's in front of me. Talk about the heart rate. Closed in, dark, but I just said, look, Lord, they told me I'm the adult in this group. I got to get these kids out. You got to do it. Darkness it's sometimes truly, it's no wonder we say it symbolizes fear and anxiousness and puts us in a terrible place. I mean, darkness is also a source of hiding. You know, I mean, my gosh, look at driving out of the city at night, going to the hospital, or driving anywhere around it anymore, no one can exist without having lights on. If the power goes out and the street lamps are out, people are just crazy. What happens? The reason we have street lights in neighborhoods, because we know for a fact that without street lights, crime goes up. So evil lurks in darkness, and we reinforce that. In John chapter 1, there's a story of Nicodemus. Remember Nicodemus? He came in and he was the Jewish priest he was the Pharisee and knew everything, but he knew he needed to go to Jesus. So he came to Jesus when? He came to Jesus in the dark, is what it said. Now, that was double symbolism, because there were two things: that he was coming to Jesus because he had acknowledged that he was now in the dark. He knew what was missing in his life. But he also knew that in order to accept what Jesus was preaching, being a priest, he had to kind of get there without being seen, because it wasn't going to go well. It wasn't going to go well in the neighborhood. That symbol is, so do we sometimes come to Jesus in the dark? Do we sometimes come to Jesus in the dark and sometimes live in our relationship in the dark? Because if everybody around us in our family and at work knew, then we'd just be some kind of weirdo, devil-stomping ninja or whatever, to use the back of my shirt. Are we afraid of the light of the world? I know at first you go, no, I'm not afraid of Jesus. I'm not afraid of any of that. But yet, are we? I mean, after all, he is the light of the entire world. And in light, we just showed, as simple as it is here, if I turn lights out or focused in this direction, you're affected by that lack of light. And these are just spotlights. The light of the world. I mean, what holds us back from that? Yes, I want the light of the world. I'm tired of living in fear. I'm tired of living in darkness. I'm tired of hiding in the shadows. A term that we often hear now with our politics and immigration. But hiding in the shadows is what many people are doing from the light of the world. The Old Testament says in the first sermon on the I Am sayings, we talked about that Jesus saying that I Am was claiming the name of Yahweh that God revealed in the Old Testament. And now here we add to that thought, the Jews, the idea of the coming of the Messiah, not only as King David, not only as a new king of all of Israel, but also as God's light coming into the world. Said said Isaiah 9, said 1 to 2, and 61, 1 to 3 are written on are noted on your handout. And I'm asking you to find others about where Jesus is the light, where the Messiah is to be the light of the world. So Jesus is, not just saying, I am the light of the world again. This whole I am is double loaded. It's loaded with, I am Yahweh, and now I am professing to be the Messiah. At first we say, oh, he's the light of the world. Yes, because Jesus is so important, and it's such a great life. He's a great prophet. He does all of these things. But understand, Jesus was deliberately choosing his words. And you heard Justin read that they started questioning him right away. And they said, when you talk about yourself, you are the only one to say these things are true. We cannot accept what you say. Who do you think you are? Is what they're saying. And he says, yes, I am saying these things about myself, but they are true. I know where I came from. I know where I'm going, but you don't know and where I came from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. This is huge, folks. We do it too. You judge by human standards. I am not judging anymore. But when I do judge, my judging is true because I am not alone. The Father who sent me is with me. I am Yahweh, I am the Messiah. That's what he's saying. So Jesus begins his ministry with quotes right out of Isaiah. He turns around and uses the scriptures that he knows, that they know so well, as he does so many times. And he says, remember just a few months ago that we were in Advent, and we lit a candle, and these words were read. the people who sat in great darkness have seen a great light. The light has dawned. That's Isaiah 9, 1 and 2. Jesus was using the greatest prophet Isaiah to tell them who he was. You want to know who God is, you want to know what it means to know who Jesus is, and this is your God that comes down. This is who he is. I am the people who sat in great darkness have seen a great light. And then in Luke we have the story of Simeon. It's the old prophet, and we actually did this message, and he welcomed the baby and his parents in the temple. He said, "For my eyes have seen the salvation, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and for the glory of your people." Twice Jesus says, "I'm the light of the world" in these. We heard one of them. Another one, Chris, because the whole scripture actually goes all the way through 9:41. And I wasn't going to make Justin or anybody read all of those verses this morning. But we're going to look at that. The first is in John 8:12. And it says, he says, "I am the light of the world." In this context, it's two different things he's saying. The first he says is that I am the light of the world. If you look at 8:12, we heard him say, "I am the light of the world. The person who follows me will never live in the darkness, but will have the light he gives." He is professing to be the Messiah. It is here. Then in 9:5, switch over to 9:5, and he says here, let's pick up at 4. While it is daytime, said we must continue to do the work of the one who sent me. Night is coming, and no one is able to work. Now understand that night was dark. It was just like you guys explained, dark. I mean, they didn't have any street lamps. They didn't have anything. It was dark. There was nothing that could be done. So this was very symbolic then. And he says, "While I am the world, I am the light of the world." And after that, he then goes on to heal the blind man by spitting on the ground. This first reference is a teaching when he says, "I am the light of the world" in chapter 8. He says it's a teaching. He is teaching on the temple, in the temple, on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, on this feast, every day they would light candles, a lot like a menorah, and they would light them. And legend had it that they were so bright that the light shined from the temple all the way down into the city, each and every night. But on the last night, all the lights were extinguished. No candles. So people are sitting in darkness and they're listening, and so Jesus is saying, I mean, you can imagine the night before it must have been like Christmas Eve here. All the candles are lighted, they're lighted on the candelabras, and they're in our hands, and all the lights are out in the church, and yet it's still just gorgeous. It's wonderful. But on this last night, even though those candles produced so much, on the last day of the feast, there were no lit candles. And so Jesus then is teaching. He says, "I am the light of the world." You don't need all those candles. Even as spectacular as they were, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. And the people are going, "My gosh, it's so dark, I can't see my hand in front of my face." They're really trying to figure all of this out. He says, "Will never walk in darkness, but they will have the light of light." The temple was in darkness, the city was in darkness, and yet he was saying, even in the midst of that, the light of the world is right here in front of you. Don't miss it. Now, Jesus was saying these words not to average individuals. He was preaching at the temple to the Jewish leaders. Folks, they didn't like him. It was worse than the Republican debates. They didn't like him. Their closed minds were to refuse to see Jesus Messiah, Jesus Yahweh, Jesus anything. And now he's saying in the midst of all their darkness that he was all that they needed. Jesus is not speaking to the crowds or his disciples, but to his bitterest, the enemies. At verse 13, he says this, The Pharisees said to Jesus, when you talk about yourself, the Pharisees said, it's real clear, he wasn't talking to the average individuals. And then he closes that out in verse 20, where he then looks at them, beginning at 19, they ask, where is your Father? And Jesus answered, you don't know me or my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father too. Now, he has claimed to be Yahweh. He has told them that Yahweh is his Father. And now he's looking at the religious experts of the world and tells them, you don't know my Father. You may be educated. You may be all full of yourself. But you don't have a clue who Yahweh is. And he says, he says, so Jesus then, he then said, then Jesus said, he said these things while he was teaching in the temple, near where the money is kept. But no one arrested him. No one. I mean, he just insulted all the Supreme Court, the president, everybody he could insult. But no one arrested him. Pretty amazing. They all reacted strong. They called him a blasphemer. They called him a liar. So for us, it's a darkness check. I mean, how many of us have decided that even our own belief that God's a loving God, God's a good thing, he forgives us, but we just can't seem to let go and let that light take complete charge. You know, we get in line and we make the first decision, and then when things blow up in our face, then we seek God. You know, we're sure that God wants what we want. We've already made up our mind. You know, these guys deliberately, the other night, needed to go outside and check on something. I keep this beside the door. Man, this has got a great beam of light. Well, I can show you that obviously I sort of need to change all the batteries. But yeah, I can still see the light beam here on the floor. It isn't great. And then beside the bed, I have nice fancy little LED lights like this one. It's not bad, but it doesn't progress far. But for Christmas, folks, for Christmas, I got one of these. And I could point at you, and I could almost blind you with this one. I could see, even in the midst of all the bright light in the room, this is just a battery light. Jesus is the light of the entire world. The entire world. It is not in the temple or by keeping the law that Jesus says that you will find light and life, but by following him. That's what he says. You need to follow him. You can't just do church. You can't just come to church. You can't just punch in and punch out. It's more than that. In fact, in the end, that Jesus literally anticipates, and this is something that is happening across our country today, that temple worship is going away. And for me and for many of you, that just seems awful. Coming to church is important to me. Not just out of the pastor, but it's important to be part, for us to sing 3 verses of a song and to sit down and pray the words and hear the music. It's important. But Jesus is saying this is going to go away because he is all that is needed. Jesus announces that he now supersedes all of that temple stuff. It's not comfortable. We like rules. We like the organization. We like it to fit in. We don't like the idea, as simple as it sounds, when someone says it's only Jesus. We don't really like that. Because our reaction to our society is it can't be that simple. There's got to be more to it. I got to do more. I got to be in charge. I got to be there. And Jesus is saying, I'm the light. He said, in darkness, there is no darkness when he's there. But the second time when Jesus says in verse 5 in chapter 9, when I'm the light of the world, these words are found in the context of healing the blind. You want to know what total darkness is? Ask one of your blind friends, who, especially if they had vision at one time in their lives. Do you see the medications that are advertised for the 24-hour thing? It is dark so long that they can't figure out 24 hours. Their brain is lost. To those of us who have any vision at all, we can at least always see bright outside, dark outside. Even if we close our eyes, we see bright and dark. That's why we blindfold. When you get blindfolded, and it's a good one, you can't see any motions or shadows or anything. Darkness is that complete. In this time, Jesus makes this statement right before he spits in the mud, takes the mud and rubs it on the blind man's eyes, and then he says, "You are healed." This is an amazing physical event. I mean, for that to happen, nerve pathways had to be healed. Blood vessels had to come in. We sometimes forget the physiology. Oh, God made him see. Yeah, but that meant he healed all of those things that were permanently damaged. Because once the miracle had occurred, the physiology had to occur too. The answer is seen in the climax of the story when Jesus calls on a man who has been healed to believe him. Jesus says, "I came into this world so that those who do not see may see," in verse 39. The healed man shows that physical and spiritual healing had taken place. But his response was, "I believe." The physical miracle was stupendous. But only the grace of God can give sight to blind eyes, and only the touch of Jesus was able to do it. No one before Jesus had ever healed the blind. That's the first time. So today the question is, who do you say he is? Last week we acknowledged and realized that he's the bread of life, the essential food. Without him, we just don't live. We just do not live. And today he's now telling us he is the light of the world. That even though we shut lights out and we can see that light diffusing amongst the rest of the light, we've seen the tactical light that's so bright that it shines everywhere, even in the bright light. But yet, Jesus' light is stronger than all of that. Because it covers the whole world. From the black hole in outer space to the black hole in our lives. Light is essential to see shapes. Without it, we can't see colors. I talked about the fish. You can't see colors. For those of us who just have old people eyes, if I don't have my glasses and I can get a bright enough light, I might be able to read, probably not in the Bible, but I might be able to read some of the letters here. Give me at least some light and I have a chance. If that's what helps us read, why is it that when our life is so dark and everything is so miserable that we can't go, "Lord, just give me some light"? And I know that light comes from Jesus. That light that allows us then, as the more light we see more colors. We see things in more detail. We see things at sharper lines. We can walk through the house and not fall down. We can walk through and not knock things off and break them. Jesus has come to dispel our darkness, so we're not always knocking things down and falling over things and making a mess of things because we're in such darkness. To all of us here for today, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." Not for some people, for all people. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, will have the light of life. And I know that your life at times feels like it's pitch black dark. But he's saying, even in the midst of that darkness, there's going to be at least this much light. But yet his light is going to be greater and brighter. Are you in darkness for today? Even in the midst of the bright sunshine today, it's going to be 60-some degrees and the sun's out. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to feel the warmth on your face, but in that, some of us are still in a real dark place. Is there part of your life that's just crying out for light? It's begging for light. Somebody you know who's begging for light. And you've got the flame. You've got the big tactical light. But you're just not sharing. The second statement that Jesus made, "I am the light of the world," we can read that when you're in total darkness. You're the blind man. You imagine that this guy's standing there and you're totally blacked out. And he's saying, "I am the light of the world." It's just didn't kick him in the shin or punch him. What do you mean? I see no light. And then he touched me. That's why the song is so valuable. He touched me. Then he touched me. Placed the mud on me. If you're lost and you need to enter heaven, you need to enter a new life, then only Jesus can provide that light. That's it. Sure, coming to church and doing and serving and being part of that is an outgrowth of that, but those things are going to keep you in darkness if that's what you put your trust in. Today you need to come to the light of the world. You need to come to the light of the world that says, I don't care what the world says, I don't care who thinks they're going to go and embarrass me. I am taking on the light of the world, and then I'm going to go share it because there's other people who feel like I do, who have felt like I do, and they shouldn't feel that way. Who is Jesus? He is the bread of life, the essential food of everything, and he tells us that. And he is the absolute light of the world. In him, there is no darkness.